Compromises fail. The Compromise of 1850. Congress approved the Compromise of 1850 proposed by Clay to try to reconcile Northern and Southern interests regarding slaves and regain balance in the Congress. In 1850, Congress approved a series of laws called the Compromise of 1850. The goal of this compromise was to reconcile differing interests between the northern and southern states about slavery and gain balance in Congress. President Millard Fillmore signed this compromise and turned it into a law. To please the North, California was admitted into the Union as a free state. Furthermore, the compromise banned slave trade in the nation's capital city. To please the South, all the new states formed from territories obtained by the Mexican-American War would decide whether they wanted to be a slave state or not through popular sovereignty. The Southern states decreed a tough new fugitive slave law. This law allowed government officials to arrest any person accused of being a runaway slave. They had no right to trial, and any slaveholder or white witness could swear under oath that the slave was a slaveholder's property. This Fugitive Slave Act became the most controversial part of the Compromise of 1850. Northerners were outraged by this law, watching how people accused of being fugitives were deprived of their freedom. The harsher this law got, the more the Northerners were convinced that slavery was evil. Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin novel showed how terrible slavery was and the horrors of the fugitive slave law. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a novel written in 1852 by Harriet Beecher Stowe. The author was a Northern lady affected by the fugitive slave law. She decided to write something that would make the whole nation aware of what an accursed thing slavery was. This novel is about kind Uncle Tom, an enslaved man who suffered abuse by the cruel Simon Legree. It highlights how African slaves were seen as objects and not as people. This novel became a bestseller and shocked thousands of people that had not been aware of slavery. People began to view slavery not only as political conflict, but as a moral and humanitarian problem as well. Southerners dismissed the book as a propaganda and claimed the novel did not give a fair picture of the lives of slaves. The Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed settlers in these territories to decide if they would allow slavery, thus contradicting the Missouri Compromise. Senator Stephen Douglas was eager to trigger the development of lands west of Illinois, so a railroad could be built to connect Illinois to the Pacific. In 1853, Douglas suggested forming two territories, Kansas and Nebraska. Southerners were opposed because both territories were close to slavery by the Missouri Compromise. Douglas proposed that the new territories decide through popular sovereignty, thus winning Southern support. Southern states supported the proposal because they believed Kansas would become a slave state. Northern states felt Douglas had betrayed them. The act was approved by both houses and President Franklin Pierce signed it, turning it into a law. Bleeding Kansas. The territory of Kansas was involved in violent acts as a result of the struggle over control between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces. The Kansas and Nebraska Act left to the white citizens the decision about whether Kansas would become a slave state or not. Both pro-slavery and anti-slavery people started to populate Kansas in order to hold a majority at the time of the election. In March 1855, thousands of Missourian citizens entered Kansas to vote illegally in the election. Kansas had 3,000 voters, but 8,000 votes were cast. Pro-slavery settlers won the election, but anti-slavery ones did not admit the defeat. Kansas had two governments, each one claiming the right to impose their rule. In April 1855, a pro-slavery sheriff was shot when he attempted to arrest some anti-slavery settlers in the town of Lawrence. The following month, the sheriff returned to Lawrence with 800 men and attacked the town. 3 days later, John Brown, an anti-slavery settler, and his people murdered 5 men and children near the Potawatomi Creek. These incidents triggered violence in the territory. For this reason, it was called Bleeding Kansas. There was blood shed in the Senate as well, when a Southern congressman attacked Charles Sumner of Massachusetts with a heavy cane until he fell to the ground, bleeding and unconscious. These episodes divided the North and South even more.